Have you ever wondered why so many people are leaving Jehovah's Witnesses? What compels them to sever ties with their community and faith, often at the cost of their entire social network of family and friends? This video dives into the complexities of disassociation and apostasy, uncovering the personal stories and motivations behind these decisions. You ready? Let's get into it. When I was growing up in the truth, which is what we called it, never just our religion or our faith, but the truth with a capital T, I never imagined I'd be on this side of the conversation. For decades, I sat through countless meetings, conventions, and assemblies where we were warned about those who left. They were weak, proud, lovers of pleasures rather than lovers of God. They were compared to dogs returning to their vomit. Yeah, that's actually a scripture the Watchtower loves to quote about people like me now. But here's the thing. After living it from the inside for 4 decades, I can tell you that the reality is far more complicated than the black and white narrative that the organization paints. So let's deep dive into why people really leave, not what Watchtower says the reason is, what Watchtower does say about it, and where their teachings clash with reality. Now, keep in mind that while I do reference the Bible in this discussion, this is not a faith-based video. For faith-based content that's not focused on the Watchtower and Jehovah's Witnesses, see the link to my other channel in the video description below. All right, now first let's get our terms straight because in witness world, words have very specific meanings that often differ from how the rest of the world uses them. The first term we'll talk about is disassociation. Disassociation is when you formally leave by either writing a letter or verbally stating that you no longer want to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. It's supposed to be voluntary, your choice. The Watchtower presents this as a personal decision that they say they respect by acknowledging you're no longer a member. Sounds reasonable, right? Like canceling your gym membership. But here's where it gets twisted. The moment you disassociate, you're treated exactly the same as someone who's been disfellowshipped, excommunicated for sin. Your family, including parents, children, siblings, they're all told to cut off all unnecessary contact with you. You become dead to them, except you're worse than dead because at least they'd have resurrection hope for you if you were actually dead. Apostasy, on the other hand, is the nuclear option in the witness vocabulary. This isn't just leaving, it's actively opposing or disagreeing with Watchtower teachings. You could be labeled an apostate for something as simple as expressing doubt about the governing body's interpretations or questioning whether 1914 really has the significance they claim it does. Any little thing like that can lead to a label of apostasy. The organization teaches that apostates are mentally diseased. Yeah, they actually use that phrase in the literature. Now, what struck me most when I started researching outside Watchtower publications was how different these terms were used in the real world. In most contexts, disassociation simply means ending an affiliation. And apostasy traditionally means abandoning religious faith altogether, not just leaving this specific religion. But the Watchtower has weaponized these terms, turning them into tools of control. And the emotional and social consequences? Devastating doesn't even begin to cover it. I've seen grown men cry like children because their parents won't speak to them anymore. I've watched families torn apart, marriages destroyed, teenagers kicked out of their homes for expressing doubts. The Watchtower claims this is loving discipline designed to shock the person back to their senses. But in reality, it's emotional blackmail, pure and simple. Let me share some stories, not just mine, but those of others who've bravely spoken out about their experiences with this cult. These aren't the caricatures that Watchtower paints at people who left to pursue fleshly desires or because they were too proud to accept correction. Take the testimony given to the Australian Royal Commission in 2015. A woman who is identified as BCB testified that she was sexually assaulted by an elder as a teenager. She told the commission, quote, "The abuse changed who I was. It destroyed my confidence and my self-esteem." The elder who handled her case destroyed his notes, saying he didn't, quote, want our wives knowing our stuff, end quote. Another woman, BCG, was forced by the elders to testify before her alleged abuser. The commission found that of 1,006 alleged perpetrators of child sex abuse identified by the Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia alone, not one was reported by the church to secular authorities. Then there's Amber Scora, whose story made national news. She spent years as a missionary in China teaching people in Mandarin. But as she explained in her memoir and in an NPR interview, quote, I was sort of hearing what I was teaching almost for the first time through their ears. And while Chinese people on the whole are so hospitable and respectful, over time I did start to notice a shift in their expression that would tell me that some of the things I was saying sounded kind of crazy to them, end quote. When her faith crumbled, she said, quote, I felt like everything that had mattered to me was gone, end quote. Then there's Mary Aguilar, who spoke out about domestic violence. Quote, I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the early 70s and 80s and a victim of domestic violence. My husband was a witness too and still is. I spoke to elders several times about his violent behavior. Their excuse was that I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't a good wife. I didn't pray enough, end quote. Notice the pattern? These aren't people who left to live immoral lives or because they were too lazy for field service. They left because of moral principles, because of love for their families, because they couldn't reconcile what they were taught with what they observed and experienced. Let's dig into some of the core beliefs that often become breaking points for people. The Watchtower presents their doctrine as the truth, unchangeable, directly from God. Well, sort of. But here's the reality check. Their teachings have changed dramatically over the years, often complete 180 turns on major issues. Take the generation teaching. That was a big one when I was in. The generation teaching based on Matthew 24:34. We were absolutely certain that the generation that saw 1914 would not pass away before Armageddon came. People born in 1914 were getting older, but that just meant the end was incredibly close. Then, as that generation started to die off, they changed the teaching. Suddenly, it was an overlapping generation, a concept so convoluted that even elders struggled to explain it. The goalpost wasn't just moved, it was launched to the other side of the planet. Suddenly, the end could be a long time away rather than imminent. Or consider organ transplants. Until 1980, they were absolutely forbidden, considered cannibalism, well, for a period of about 10 years. How many witnesses died refusing transplants? Then, new light suddenly was a conscience matter. No apology for those who died, no acknowledgement of the error, just the light gets brighter. The blood doctrine is particularly heartbreaking. The Watchtower teaches that accepting a blood transfusion is so serious that God will destroy you at Armageddon for it. They base this on a few scriptures about eating blood, making a massive leap to include medical transfusion. But here's where it gets hypocritical. Now they do allow some blood fractions, parsing blood into components and deciding which parts are acceptable and which parts aren't. It's like saying you can't eat a ham sandwich, but you can eat bread and you can eat ham and you can eat cheese, just don't put them together. Well, many of us realize this wasn't about biblical truth. It was about organizational control and not admitting error. The shunning doctrine is another major breaking point for a lot of people. The Watchtower claims it's based on Scripture, but their application goes way beyond anything in the Bible. They'll quote 1 Corinthians 5 about not eating with wrongdoers, but Paul was talking about not sharing in the Lord's evening meal with unrepentant sinners in the congregation. Well, the Watchtower expanded this to mean complete social isolation, even from family members. And what's particularly galling about this is their hypocrisy, because they criticize the Catholic Church for excommunication practices in the past. And shortly after that, implemented something far more severe. At least excommunicated Catholics can still talk to their families. Then there's the authority structure. The governing body claims to be the faithful and discreet slave mentioned by Jesus, God's sole channel of communication to mankind. Now, that used to be different too. They used to say it was all the anointed who are going to heaven. No, no, no. Now it's just the governing body. But look at their track record of predictions and interpretations. They were wrong about the end coming in 1914, 1925, 1975. They were wrong about the generation of 1914 not dying off. If a prophet in ancient Israel had the Watchtower's track record, they would have been stoned as a false prophet. The real kicker, they claim they're not inspired and can make mistakes, but also demand absolute obedience even when the direction doesn't make sense from a human standpoint. They've actually said this. They want the authority of prophets, but not the accountability. The community aspect is probably the most powerful tool the organization wields. When you're born into it, like I was, your entire social universe exists within the congregation. Your friends, your family, everybody's a witness. This isn't by accident, it's by design. The Watchtower actively discourages unnecessary association with non-witnesses. They call it bad association based on 1 Corinthians 15:33. School friends, discouraged. After work socializing with your colleagues, dangerous. Joining clubs or community organizations, you're taking time away from spiritual activities. Former members who testified to the New Zealand Royal Commission described this perfectly. One of them said, quote, limits were placed on who we associated with, what we wore, what we watched, what we read, how much education we received, and our recreational activities. The JW Church was not just a place of worship, it reached into the core of almost every aspect of our lives, end quote. And I can testify to that. This isolation serves two purposes. First, it keeps you from forming support networks outside the religion. And second, it makes leaving incredibly costly. When your entire social world is contingent on remaining a witness, the price of leaving isn't just spiritual, it's everything. I remember sitting in meetings where they talk about how worldly people only showed conditional love, unlike the unconditional love in the congregation. The irony was suffocating. There's nothing more conditional than love that evaporates the moment you disagree with organizational doctrine. One former member put it this way in an NPR interview in 2019. Quote, when my dad died, it was sad, but it was temporary because all of us die. And basically, the way the religion explained it is that God will resurrect those who are faithful and can bring them back to life in the paradise. So death was always a temporary thing to me when I was a Jehovah's Witness. End quote. But when they left and experienced real loss without that framework, they had to learn to live with genuine grief and uncertainty. The pressure to conform in this religion is relentless. Every aspect of your life is subject to scrutiny and control. What you wear, what you watch, what you read, who you marry, what career you pursue. Everything is filtered through the lens of how will this affect my standing in the congregation and my relationship with Jehovah? They have a term, stumbling others, that's weaponized to control behavior. Almost anything could potentially stumble somebody. Grow a beard, you might stumble someone, but you can do that now. Wear a dress that's an inch too short, stumbling. Express an opinion that differs slightly from the Watchtower, you're definitely stumbling. The fear of being marked as bad association, even while still in the organization, keeps people in line. You learn to self-censor, to never express doubt or concern. This creates an echo chamber where everyone appears to be in perfect agreement. They're not really. But it reinforces the illusion that this must be the truth because everybody believes it. But what they don't tell you is a lot of people are faking it. From an academic study published in PubMed Central in 2021 called Living Between Two Different Worlds, Experiences of Leaving a High-Cost Religious Group, researchers found that many participants who were witnesses had doubts for years before leaving. They stayed for their families out of fear or simply because they didn't know life outside was even possible. Now, that's not news to us in the EXJW community. We call the people who stay just to avoid shunning PMO, physically in, mentally out. And I'm convinced that's a huge section of the people who are left. The Australian Royal Commission heard testimony about how an elder discouraged an abuse victim from going to the commission by saying, "Do you really want to drag Jehovah's name through the mud?" This perfectly encapsulates the pressure. Protecting the organization's reputation is more important than justice or truth. The saddest cases are those who've given their entire lives to the organization. Imagine being 60 or 70, having foregone education and career because the end was just around the corner, having no retirement savings because you wouldn't need them in this system, and then realizing it was all a lie. The sunk cost is so enormous that many people, they just can't face that. It's easier to double down than admit you've wasted your life. Just yesterday, an EXJW friend reached out to me. He was kayaking with his buddy, also an EXJW in his 50s, who had no retirement plan due to being a witness his entire life, believing the end was nigh. This is a very common experience. So one former ministerial servant testified, quote, "We stopped going to meetings 5 years ago, but didn't officially come out until November 2019. The stress in coming out affects one physically, mentally, and emotionally," end quote. His wife suffered too many strokes, and when she was rushed to the hospital, their witness children didn't even respond when they were notified. But he said, "But we are reaping what we have sown. I would have acted this way to a large extent when I was a JW." Leaving is just the beginning. The real work starts after, when you're trying to build a life from scratch without the framework that defined everything for you. The practical challenges are huge. Many born-in witnesses have limited education because higher education was discouraged and is discouraged by the Watchtower. They lack professional networks because their connections were all inside the organization. They may have poor social skills for interacting with worldly people because they were taught to keep such interactions superficial and to a minimum. But beyond the practical, there's also the psychological. When your entire worldview collapses, when you realize that what you thought was capital T truth was just another high control religion, it's devastating. Many ex-witnesses go through a grieving process, grieving for the family they've lost, for the certainty they once had, for the years they can't get back. There is good news, though. Life outside is not what they told us it would be. The world isn't full of drug-addicted, immoral, miserable people just waiting to corrupt us. Those things exist, of course, just not anywhere at the scale Watchtower makes it out to be. Most people are just trying to live decent lives, be good to their families, and find meaning and happiness. And they do it without needing an organization to micromanage every aspect of their existence. There are support systems now that didn't exist in the past. Online communities of ex-witnesses who understand exactly what you're going through. Therapists who specialize in religious trauma and cult recovery. Books and resources that help you deconstruct the indoctrination and build healthy thought patterns. The freedom is intoxicating, but it's also terrifying. Suddenly you can make your own choices based on your own conscience and reasoning. You can pursue education if you want, explore different philosophies if you want, make friends based on common interests rather than shared beliefs. You can raise your children to think critically rather than just obey. For those still in who are reading this, having doubts, feeling trapped, you're not alone. Your doubts aren't because you're weak or proud or influenced by Satan. They're because you're human with a functioning mind that recognizes contradictions and hypocrisy. Listen to that. The Watchtower teaches that leaving leads to misery and emptiness, and there is a difficult adjustment period. I'm not going to lie about that. Losing your entire support system is brutal. But what they don't tell you is that many who leave find far more joy, authentic relationships, and meaning in their lives than they ever had inside. That's certainly the case for me. They say we leave because we want to sin. But it seems to me that people who leave are more ethical outside than they were inside. When you do good because you choose to, not because you're afraid of being destroyed at Armageddon or losing your family, it means something different. It's genuine. And you're not listening to Watchtower and all their heinous doctrines, which make good people less good. They say we become angry, bitter apostates. And yeah, there is anger. Anger for being lied to, losing years of your life, seeing your families held hostage. But that anger can be channeled into helping others, building a better life, and ensuring our children never experience what we did. Here's what Watchtower doesn't want current witnesses to know. Many of us who left are happier now. We're not the miserable, debauched caricatures they paint in their magazines and videos. We volunteer in our communities, genuinely helping people without counting time or placing magazines. We have deep, meaningful relationships based on authentic connection rather than shared indoctrination. We celebrate birthdays and holidays, some of us, some still don't, creating happy memories with our children instead of having them sit out of every school celebration. We pursue education and careers that fulfill us rather than limiting ourselves to window washing and house cleaning. Not that there's anything wrong with those jobs, they just shouldn't be your only option. We've discovered that worldly people can be incredibly kind, generous, and moral, that other religions, philosophies, and ways of life have wisdom to offer, that questions and doubts aren't weakness, but strength. They're how we grow and learn. Most importantly, we've learned that love, real love, isn't conditional on believing the same doctrines. It doesn't evaporate when someone changes their mind or follows a different path. The love the Watchtower offers is transactional. Believe and obey, and we'll love you. Question or leave, and you're dead to us. That's not love, that's manipulation. To those still inside who are struggling with your doubts, your feelings are valid. The questions you're afraid to ask out loud are legitimate. The inconsistencies you see aren't because you lack faith or spiritual insight, they're because you're paying attention. To those who've recently left or in the process of leaving, it gets better. The pain of losing your family and friends is real and profound, but you can build a new life. You're stronger than you know, and there's a whole community of us out here who understand exactly what you're going through. To those who've been out for years, let's continue to be compassionate and supportive to those still finding their way. You remember how hard it was for you? How scary, how overwhelming? Be the support you wished you'd had. And to the Watchtower organization itself, your control is slipping. The internet has made it impossible to hide your history anymore. Your false predictions, your policy changes, your cover ups. Every year, more people wake up and get out. Every year, fewer young people are getting baptized despite being raised in the organization. Your threats of Armageddon have lost all their power because it's been how many years now? 140? No fulfillment, no Armageddon. The truth about the truth is that it isn't the truth. It's a high control religious organization that uses fear, guilt, and social pressure to maintain power over its members. But more and more people are seeing through it, choosing freedom over fear, authentic relationship over conditional love, and personal integrity over organizational loyalty. For those of us who've left, we've discovered something that Watchtower never wanted us to know. Life outside isn't just possible, it's beautiful. It's full of wonder and possibility and genuine human connection. It's messy and uncertain sometimes, yeah, but it's real. And after decades of living in an artificial bubble of manufactured certainty, reality, with all its complexities and challenges, is a breath of fresh air. The reasons people leave are as varied as the people themselves, but they all come down to this. We leave because we must, because integrity demands it, because love, real love, requires it, because truth, actual truth, not organizational truth, capital T, calls for it. And despite what they told us would happen, the sun still rises every day. Life goes on, and for many of us, it's better than we ever imagined it could be. That's why Jehovah's Witnesses leave. Not because we're weak or wicked or worldly, but because we're human beings who refuse to sacrifice our humanity on the altar of organizational control. And that, perhaps, is the most powerful testimony of all. Thanks for watching. If you're still a Christian, check out my faith-based channel linked to in the video description. Also, if you're still a Christian, check this out. I wanted to take a second to tell you about my book, The Broken Mirror: Rediscovering Our True Nature in Christ, will transform how you see yourself forever. Stop living as a struggling sinner trying to be good enough and discover you're already a beloved child of God with His divine nature flowing through you. This book will free you from shame, give you unshakable identity, and show you how to access God's peace, wisdom, and strength from within. The book shows how this story unfolds from Genesis to Revelation and teaches you to live from rest, see others as fellow image bearers, and step into your true calling as a radiant reflector of divine light. Your daily struggles will become opportunities for God's nature to shine through you. Get ready to live the abundant life Jesus promised. The link to the book is in the video description. Hard copy, Kindle, and audiobook versions are all available. May God bless your journey along His path for you.